Chapter 10. The sun shone bright and clear over the new Olympic Stadium at Stockholm, Sweden. It was July 6, 1912, the first day of the track and field sports at the first Olympic Games. Around the cinder track marched hundreds of men and women athletes. They came from 26 different countries from every part of the world, and they strode along to the cheers of 30,000 people who had come to watch. The athletes went proudly past the royal box of King Gustav and Queen Victoria of Sweden. Many other important people were in the box, too, to review the parade. Sitting together were Colonel Victor Balk, president of the Swedish Olympic Commission, and James E. Sullivan of the American Commission. The American athletes were just coming past the box, and in the fourth row marched a tall, powerful-looking Indian. He had a shock of black hair. His big square jaw was set firmly. His half-closed eyes stared straight ahead. "That's Big Jim Thorpe," said Mr. Sullivan. "He comes from our Carlisle Indian School, and he's one of the most versatile athletes we've ever seen in the United States." "Indeed," said Colonel Ballock, "I shall look forward to seeing him perform. We think that the champion athlete is one who can do many different things well. So we have the pentathlon, 5 different contests, and the decathlon, 10 different contests, all of which the same men will compete." The colonel didn't have long to wait. The very next day, the pentathlon was held. All over the stadium, field men were warming up. Big Jim Thorpe walked in with Pop Warner. He was one of the American team's trainers. "Well, Jim, you're about ready," he said, "but I never expected you to be here when I first saw you at Carlisle. You were a skinny little fellow then." Jim smiled. He could hardly believe it himself. But in his years at Carlisle, he had grown as fast as a milkweed in the spring and as sturdy as one of the oak trees near the Thorpe cabin. "Guess I'll jog around a bit to loosen up." Mike Murphy, the head trainer of the Olympic team, came over to Pop Warren. "I'm eager to see how your big Indian does today. He can beat anybody in the United States, but these are the very best athletes in the whole world. In every sport I've asked Jim to try, he's always excelled," said Pop. "You've done a fine job of coaching him," Mike said. "You're about the best there is at training athletes." Pop laughed. "I didn't do much for Jim. When I found him, all he needed was to grow, and look at him now." Mike nodded. "Over 6 feet tall and 185 pounds of smooth muscle. You know, I thought he was a little lazy on this trip. He trotted around a bit, but he hardly practiced at all." Pop Warren laughed. "Yes, but that's because Jim knows how to save his energy for the races. When he's in top condition as now, all he needs is to loosen up his muscles. You'll see." The judges called for the running broad jump, the first event in the pentathlon, but one by one the star athletes of the world took their jumps. Fred By of Norway, Frank Lukman of Canada, Hugo Westlander of Sweden, and many others. Finally, it was Jim Thorpe's turn. The big Indian walked slowly away from the takeoff board about 12 yards back. He stood quietly a moment to plan his jump, and then in a flash he was running at top speed. He jumped and soared high in the air. His great speed and the height of his jump carried him far, far out. Legs extended, he reached for every inch he had landed. 23 feet, 2 7/10 inches, one of the judges called. People in the stands buzzed with excitement. Each man got 2 more jumps, but no one could approach Jim's mark. "The winner, Jim Thorpe of the United States," called the judge. The American athletes set up a shout, "Rah, rah, rah, USA!" There was loud applause from the stands for Jim's fine performance. He trotted over to the javelin field. There a group of Swedish spectators were cheering. "Here's where the Scandinavians will shine." And when every man had thrown the long wooden spear 3 times, it was By of Norway and Wieslander of Sweden who took the first 2 places. But Jim Thorpe was close behind them for 3rd place. Now it was the turn of the Norwegians to cheer. "Hurrah, hurrah," they shouted. "We'll beat the United States yet." But in the 200-meter dash, it was Big Jim Thorpe who raced across the finish line in first place. In the discus throw, it was Jim Thorpe who tossed the round flat weight the farthest. "Rah, rah, rah, USA!" "Wait for the 1,500 meters," shouted one of the Swedes in the stands. Jim toed the mark for the start of his last race. Almost a mile. Crack! Went the starting gun. 2 men dashed to the front. Around the first turn, they were 20 yards ahead. "They can't keep up with that," Jim said to himself. He held a steady pace. But the second time around the track, the two front runners were exhausted. Jim passed them easily, and the third time around, he was still ahead. On the last lap, he put on all the speed he had, and Fred, the great athlete from Norway, struggled to catch up. He raced across the finish, the winner. "Oh, man, that Jim," Pop Warner smiled. "Isn't he a horse?" "Winner of the pentathlon, James Thorpe of the United States," the judge called out. Up went the American flag in the winner's pole. The crowd stood and cheered for Jim's great performance, and the Americans shouted over again, "Rah, rah, rah" for the USA. In the royal box, Colonel Balk said, "Mr. Sullivan, I've never seen such a man. 4 first places and 1 third place of the 5 events. Why, nobody will ever come close to that." And as the days went by, American athletes won most of the prizes, and all the other athletes were certain that the United States would lose the decathlon. They still thought Europeans were best in all-around sports. The decathlon was held the last 3 days of the meet. On the first day, Jim Thorpe won the shot put. He made fast time in the 100-meter dash and a good mark in the broad jump. When the judges figured up the points at the end of the day, Jim was far ahead of the other 22 contestants. On the second day, he won the hurdle race, and then he won the high jump, and he ran well into the 400-meter race. Again, he was way ahead in the points at the end of the day. "He is a horse," said Mike Murphy. "You were right about him, Pop." "This is nothing," said Pop. "Why, they ought to have him try some football, baseball, lacrosse, hockey, basketball, tennis, swimming, handball, skating, and target shooting throw in. Then Jim could really show you something. He's the best I've ever seen in all those sports and more, too." On the last day, Jim kept up his great records in the disc throwing and in the pole vault and the javelin throw, and nobody could match his point total now. As in the pentathlon, the last race was the 1,500-meter run, and even Jim was a little tired by now. But off he started with a long, easy stride. "Why, it's only a mile to go," he thought. "I could run 10 times that far." And once again he called on all his great strength and energy, and once again he raced across the finish line, the winner. "Rah, rah, rah for the USA!" Panting from his hard race, Jim watched with pride as the United States flag went up on the winner's pole. In the royal box, Colonel Black held out his hand to Mr. Sullivan. "The greatest performance I've ever seen," he said. "Your Jim Thorpe made 8,412 points in the decathlon, where even 8,000 would be sensational. And again, he won 4 first places. Why, it's unbelievable." The winning athletes trooped up to the royal box to receive their trophies. The king gave each one a laurel wreath and a gold medal. Jim Thorpe's turn came, and the huge crowd cheered itself hoarse. Led by King Gustav himself, the tall, thin monarch shook hands with Jim. "You, sir, are the greatest athlete in the world." Jim gulped. "Thank you," he said, and the king handed Jim his wreath and 2 gold medals, and he gave Jim also a large bronze statue, his own gift, and a silver Viking ship set with jewels. It was a gift from the Tsar of Russia. Jim couldn't say another word. He just nodded and smiled. Never had he dreamed of such a day as this. Never had he imagined his path could be so bright. Perhaps he had proved himself worthy to be called Chief Withohuk. It was the afternoon on November 9th, 1912, and the stands around the football field at West Point, New York, were jammed. Only 3,000 people could get in, and many were turned away. The cadets of the United States Military Academy had a powerful football team this year. It was one of the strongest teams in the East, Army. Army was favored to win this afternoon, too, over the Carlisle Braves, led by Captain Jim Thorpe. But Carlisle had a fine record also. They hadn't lost a game, and they had beaten the big colleges and the smaller schools alike. The cadets in the stands jumped up and cheered as the Army football players ran into the field, and there were several teams of them, big husky boys, and they spread out to practice kicking and running. "That man Jim Thorpe is kicking," cried another. "They say nobody can stop him. He's a team all by himself." "Well, he's not nearly as big as Devore. I'll bet our boys will chew him up today." On the field, Pop Warner gave his last instructions to the Carlisle players. "Go get him." The players trotted to their positions, and Devore kicked off for the Army. Thorpe ran over to snatch up the ball, and Army players closed in on him, but he pounded ahead for 15 yards before he was brought down. "Stop that, Thorpe!" chanted the Army cadets, and Jim grinned. He whispered to Gus Welch, the Carlisle quarterback. Welch barked the signals, and the ball came back to halfback Alex Arcasa. Jim led the interference, and he plowed into the giant Devore in a powerful block, and Arcasa slipped through the line for a 15-yard gain. "Wow," grasped the tall cadet corporal. "That Thorpe certainly can block, but I thought he'd carry the ball." Welch called out his signals, and back came the ball to Arcasa again, and this time he slipped the ball to Jim in a crisscross play. "Stop Thorpe," shouted the Army players. Two of them tackled him at the line of scrimmage, but he plunged right ahead, running for all he was worth. Knees lifted high, he shook off the tacklers and gained 15 yards before two more Army men brought him down. On the next play, the Army charged so hard that a Carlisle football player fumbled the ball, and the quarterback Pritchard pounced on it for the Army. Right away, Army halfback Hobbs broke loose for a long run. The crowd was yelling, "Touchdown, touchdown!" But Jim Thorpe cut across from the other side of the field, running like a deer. He caught the speeding Hobbs. He brought him down with a crashing tackle at the 16-yard line. For a moment, Hobbs just lay there on the ground, stunned by the tackle. Jim pulled him to his feet. "Nice run," he said. Still, Army could not be stopped. Yard by yard, the West Point backs pushed the ball across the goal line. Army led 6-0 as Pritchard missed the point after touchdown. Army kicked off to Carlisle, and the Indians could not gain, so Jim Thorpe fell back to kick. He swung his leg into the ball with all his might. High and far it traveled. There were ohs from the spectators as Jim's tremendous 70-yard kick. Thorpe could do everything better than anybody else. After this, the Army team could not gain. Hobbs punted, and it was Carlisle's ball in the Army 44-yard. "Come on, fellows, let's play some football now," Jim urged his team. Arcasa slipped the ball to Thorpe on the crisscross, and Jim ripped off 17 yards before the Army players pulled him down. "Stop Jim Thorpe! Stop Jim Thorpe!" And Jim just grinned. Welch snapped out his signals, and the ball came back to Arcasa. The two teams lined up for the try for a point after touchdown, and Jim stood ready to kick. Back came the ball to Alex Arcasa, and quickly he set in on the ground for a nice place to kick. Jim's toes met the ball with a smack. Up the ball went and over and right between the goalposts. It sailed for the field, and Carlisle led 7-6. On the bench, Pop Warner sighed in relief. "Whew, well, I can always count on Jim when we need some points." Carlisle kicked off to Army to start the second half. Straight down the field he ran, twisting and turning to avoid tacklers. Big DeVore dived in on him, but Jim pushed the tackle off with a mighty straight arm, and two Army men grabbed him at the 10-yard line. But Jim was running so fast and hard they couldn't hang on. Every man on the Army team had tried to tackle him, but no one could stop him. He dashed across the goal line for a touchdown. Even the Army cadets stood to cheer for Thorpe. One exclaimed, "Thorpe is everything they say, and then some." On the field, the officials blew their whistles and waved their arms. "Carlisle offside. Score doesn't count," they shouted. Down on the field, Jim said, "Oh, that's too bad. That was fun. Come on, Gus, let's get back those points." The Carlisle boys did get them back. They plunged and ran and pushed Army all over the field. He made 2 touchdowns and kicked the points after score down. Carlisle 27, Army 6. When the final gun sounded, the crowd jumped to its feet to cheer Thorpe and his teammates as they jogged off the field. Several reporters rushed up to Jim. "Congratulations," said one. "You'd be sure to make an All-American again if you'd played only this one game. Would you call this your best game yet?" "Oh, I don't know. I guess we all played pretty well today, but you'll have to ask Pop. My job is playing, not talking." Jim felt good about winning, but he wished everyone would make such a fuss about it. He walked on to the dressing room. "You've got a great team, Pop," called another reporter, turning to the coach. "What'd you think of that Thorpe today?" "He played a fine game," Pop said. So did 10 other Carlisle boys. "Is that all you've got to say after that tremendous performance? Just remember, if I do any bragging, you fellows will print it. You wouldn't want me to brag, would you?" "Jim has a great scoring record," said another sports writer, "but I never realized he was such a team player too. Why, he's in every play, and he does more than his share of everything." "Well, football players don't come any smarter than Jim. He doesn't try to hog all the glory. He knows football is a team game." "You've coached him for 4 years now. Is he the best player you've ever seen?" "Well, I expect to see a lot more football players in my time," answered Pop with a laugh. "Quit kidding us, Pop. You act as modest as Thorpe does. I know he's the greatest player I've ever seen, or ever will see." Right, said another reporter. Back at Carlisle about 2 months later, Pop sent his football star one afternoon. The big Indian boy soon came to the office. "You wanted to talk to me?" "Yes, come in," thundered Pop Warren. He was pacing the floor angrily. "What is it, Pop? You seem upset. Did I do something wrong? Maybe it's all those reporters." "You mean because you were chosen All-American halfback again and scored 25 touchdowns and 108 points last fall? No, it's something else." Jim guessed. Some more famous doctors coming to take measurements to find out what they already know, that you're in perfect physical specimen? No. Jim couldn't understand what was wrong. More baseball teams bothering you to sign me up? Jim, did you ever play baseball for money? Baseball for money. Jim stopped to think. Well, yes, Pop, 2 years ago during the summer down in North Carolina. It wasn't much. They gave us only $15 a week, but it paid my expenses. I was really playing for the fun of it. Pop Warner blazed back. Only a professional takes money for playing. An amateur can't take a cent. What? Jim stuttered. Why didn't you tell me? Don't you know the rule? Didn't you know that $15 a week made you a professional right then? Jim was startled. Why, no, Pop, I didn't know. Other college boys were playing. Everybody knew about it. But the others didn't use their own names, Pop Warner exploded. I've got to hand it to you, Jim, for using your own name honestly, but you should have known the rule. But what does it make a difference? It was 2 years ago. It means you shouldn't have been on the Olympic team. It means that the American Amateur Athlete Union says you must return your prizes and trophies. But, Pop, what does summer baseball have to do with competing on the Olympic team? Nobody ever paid me anything for running or jumping or throwing the disc and javelin. It's the rule. You are an amateur athlete if you've played any kind of professional sports. Jim sat and thought. Try as he would, he couldn't see the sense of this. He had gone to North Carolina with a couple of Carlisle boys only for the thrill of playing baseball. He hadn't needed the money. He hadn't even wanted it, and the other boys had needed it. Jim had had many big offers for large sums of money, but had never taken any of them. They want me to give back my prizes? It was a blow to his pride after that great day in Stockholm. All right, Pop, if that's the rules, they can have the prizes back, but I don't understand it. I never meant to do anything wrong. He was thinking, I've won lots of things and never bragged much, but I guess I can lose with honor, like Blackhawk. I knew you'd see it that way, said Pop. I'm mighty sorry for you, but you've got to stick to the rules. I hope they won't blame you for this, Pop exploded. Why, you great big galoot, it's you I'm worried about. What do you think I ought to do now? Why, I guess you'll have to accept an offer from one of the Major League Baseball teams, the New York Giants, say, and there may be soon professional football. If you want to make your living from sports, there's no better athlete than you. Jim thought that over for a minute, and he still liked sports for the thrill and excitement of competition. But if he could make his living from them too, why sure, Pop. That's what I'll do. If they say I'm professional, well, I'll be one. There was a knock on the door, and a messenger brought in a telegram for Pop. He ripped it open and read it. Ugh, he scolded. Then he grinned. Well, Jim, this may make you feel better. They tried to offer your prizes to the Scandinavian fellows who came in second. You know, Fred and Hugo, but they won't take them. They say they don't understand our rules and you won fairly. This did make Jim feel better. By and Wessender were acting like great chiefs and refusing the awards. Even so, I guess I'll still have to give up the prizes. Jim's heart would be heavy for a long time as he at this unexpected blow. Yes, said Pop, I'll send them to the Amateur Athlete Union, but you're still the greatest athlete, and you'll be a big success as a professional sports player also. Thanks, Pop. He would be a success, he vowed. He must always prove himself worthy to be called a great chief.